Hello, darling. So I wanted to introduce to you Mary Shelley, the Romantic Era in Frankenstein. Some general information. It is titled Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Now, Prometheus is one of the figures who the Greek gods got really pissed at because he gave fire to the humans, right? So, according to this lore, he gave the humans fire. Humans were no longer dependent on the Greek gods for life because fire gives you warmth, gives you food, right? So now we're able to survive without them. The Greek gods did not like this. They were pretty pissed about it. And he spent the rest of his life getting his liver pecked out by an eagle or something like that. So they chained him up, and every day his liver would grow back, and every day that same bird would come back and peck it out. And that was his punishment for helping the humans, right? So Mary Shelley initially published this book in 1818. That's the original edition. And the 1831 edition was the revised edition, which is the most widely read today. We are going to be reading this edition. I do want to point out that author Mary Shelley did not put her name on the book. It was Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus by, quote, the author, okay? I guarantee you if she didn't do this, we wouldn't know Frankenstein today. Why would she give up credit for something that's so wonderful? No one wants to read what a woman has to say at all. Come on, guys. So, the misogyny was real. So she published it by the author, and then in 1831 she was like, oh, that was me, hi guys, after like it gained traction, right? The genre of this is a gothic novel. It is also science fiction, and it is romantic literature. This is the most romantic novel you will ever read, okay? So the narrative structure is a frame narrative, and that's important to just understanding what's happening in the story. It's a story of a story of a story, okay? I'm going to come back to this concept. So here is Mary Shelley and Percy Bysshe Shelley. We've got literary celebrities. Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin, those were her parents. Mary Wollstonecraft was like one of the OG feminists. She wrote and published the book A Vindication on the Rights of Women, where she would like made it known like, hey guys, women, we should have rights, just saying, right? So Mary Shelley was profoundly interested in her reputation and writings, and William Godwin was described as an emotionally distant parent, okay? So her mom dies 11 days after she gave birth to Mary Shelley due to puerperal fever. All right, what is this? It was often transmitted by doctors proceeding directly from autopsies to births. Okay, so they didn't really believe in washing hands, and they actually thought people who thought you should wash your hands are crazy, which is kind of funny, post-pandemic world. But this fool literally went from like dealing with a corpse, sewing up, a dead body, to like not washing his hands and going straight to like delivering Mary Shelley and touching her mom's hoo-ha. Like, come on. Of course you're going to get something. So that was spread often by doctors, ignorant at the time, right? So that's why her mom died, which is kind of shitty, honestly. Her father remarries 4 years later. She does not get along with his new wife. She found her, quote, insufferable. And then she was sent off to boarding school in Scotland. So she spent an extended time in Scotland and went to go live with some family friends. Now, there is a little bit of scandalo here. It gets a little scandalous, okay? So, July 1814, Mary and Percy fell in love against her father's orders, obviously, and they ran off together in July. November of that same year, Percy's wife gave birth to a son. Okay, and then the following February, Mary gives birth to a premature daughter who ends up dying less than 2 weeks later. But basically, you have Percy Bysshe Shelley here juggling Harriet and Mary Shelley, and they're just like, what are we doing here? What is happening, right? So she elopes with Percy Bysshe Shelley like a year after that. She was 16 years old, and this was after the suicide of his earlier wife, Harriet Westbrook, earlier that month. His wife straight up killed herself, and then later that month they got married. Now, I want you to know that I think Percy was 21 at this time. Whatever. Early 20s. And both Mary and Harriet were 16. So I know times are different now, but they were so young. They were so young. So I don't know if it's any of their faults, really, what was happening. Okay, January of 1816, she gives birth to their son, William. Mary gives birth to William. And June 16th, 1822, she had a life threatening miscarriage, which was shortly followed by Percy's death. Percy drowns in the Gulf of Spezi. And here's his little funeral pyre right here. Mary Shelley was not allowed to attend the funeral because women don't belong there. And yeah, so if you've ever seen Supernatural, like this idea of like a hunter's funeral where you put the body on a bunch of logs in sticks and burn it, this was called a funeral pyre, Pyre, and this is how they went about his funeral. Now, legend has it, okay, that Mary Shelley wasn't allowed to be there, right? But his heart calcified. Calcified as in like got really hard, so it didn't burn, okay? There's like this like mysticalness to the story. And what happened is their friend Lord Byron went to the funeral and then gave Mary Shelley the heart that was left over from the pyre. So legend has it, Mary Shelley kept his heart wrapped in sheets of poetry in her desk, and she was buried with it. So we've got Mary Shelley in her tomb and everything with her mom, dad, son, his wife, their kid, and Percy Bysshe Shelley's heart, because that's all that was left of him. So she ends up dying of a brain tumor or something started by a brain tumor at 53 years old in 1851. I do want you to know that she was allegedly very poor towards the end of her life. So it's kind of crappy that like 200 years later, we're still talking about this amazing, novel, and so much has been inspired from it. Yet she couldn't even afford firewood to keep her warm. So like while she was about to die. So that sucked. Okay, so there's some criticism of the 1818 edition. Basically, the one we're reading was heavily edited, and it was because society didn't like it. They said it was, quote, far too radical and vulgar. Okay. Some review, a political periodical, said that Frankenstein was a tissue of horrible and disgusting absurdity upon its release. Okay, so what are the differences exactly between the 1818 and the 1831? I would say one of the main differences is Victor's, let's say, mindset, okay? So 1818, he was driven by ambition and personal choice. Versus 1831, he's more of a victim of fate. I feel like you guys are going to get annoyed at him. I get annoyed at him, but it's okay. So the 1818, this is like the differences between the language and the perception. So 1818, Victor says, I messed up because I was arrogant and curious. Versus 1831, Victor says, I was doomed from the start. Fate had it out for me. So it's not his fault. Fate did it, right? So this edition also includes more of Victor's motivations and thoughts for creating life. So here's different things like scenes, portrayals, etc. You can look at the differences if you'd like. This is also a picture of Mary Shelley's manuscript of writing Frankenstein. It's just very pretty. I thought you should see it. Now, the makings of Frankenstein. She said, how I, then a young girl, came to think of and dilate upon so very hideous an idea. So 1816, summer, Switzerland. There is huge rainstorms. They are confined inside. Like they can't go outside. It's very dangerous. So they were neighbors with this guy named Lord Byron, who was Percy's friend that brought the heart to Mary Shelley. And he proposed, they were all writers, right? And he proposed, we shall each write a ghost story, right? And then so everybody's over here trying to figure out a ghost story. There was a doctor that was there with him as well, and he wrote something on a vampire, which later inspired Dracula, the novel. So Shelley wanted to write a story, quote, which would speak to the mysterious fears of our nature and awaken thrilling horror, one to make the reader dread to look around, to curdle the blood, and quicken the beatings of the heart. So she really wanted to focus on something like that's going to inspire true horror, right? Byron and Percy frequently discuss the nature of the principle of life, Darwin's experiments, and the possibility of reanimating a corpse, right? So Mary Shelley was like, dang, you guys are writing stories and I can't think of anything. She gets frustrated. She overhears these conversations. She goes for a nap, okay? This is what scholars call a literary vision, but she's like, I don't know what to write about. Takes a nap, can't really nap, and then this is what happens. When I placed my head on the pillow, I did not sleep, nor could I be said to think. I saw, with shut eyes but acute mental vision, I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then on the working of some powerful engine show signs of life, and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. So she literally had this literary vision of like the creature coming to life and Victor Frankenstein just over the body, right? So this was it. She wrote it down, made a short story of it, and then Percy Shelley was like, dude, you need to make this into a full-blown book because this is good, right? This is how she came about writing Frankenstein, but, you know, writing art, etc. is a reflection of the world around people. So what was happening during this time? Romantic era was 1800 to 1890 roughly. The Industrial Revolution took place in 1820s and 1840s. What was that? It was the invention of factories and all these things where, like, you know, there was like a little like knob that only like a 4-year-old could fit their finger in, and if it got chopped off, shit, throw it out, get another 4-year-old. This was way before child labor laws, okay? So then they celebrated rebellion and revolution. They celebrated scientific advancement, which they called enlightenment. And there were fears and consequences of interference with natural order as in life and death. So the natural order of things is that a person with a womb will give birth to another person. What's not the natural order of things is getting a bunch of body parts and sewing them together and bringing that to life, right? So this is a really big concept that they were exploring at the time. The Zeitgeist, that's just the term for the spirit of a generation or period of time. So the Romantic Zeitgeist was radical individualism, self-revelation of the artist, emotions, and faith. Not faith in God or religion, but faith in the imagination, faith in emotions. Those were huge at the time. Nature, not only is it really important just because nature is a vast, you know, almost character of its own. You can honestly write an essay on nature being its own character in Frankenstein. But the natural goodness of man, nature versus nurture. Are we born innately good? Are we born innately evil? Who knows? And that is something you can explore in an essay as well. So the focus was the sublime. Basically, our goal is to get to the sublime. Now, what is the sublime? The sublime is a super sensuous realm of being. Super sensuous, meaning beyond the 5 senses. So beyond whatever I can see, touch, hear, taste, smell. Okay? It's like the 6th sense. It's another experience. So the idea here is that truth doesn't lie in nature. However, nature leads us to the sublime, right? And the sublime is like this like state that we just really want to get to. So there was a big focus as well on memory, on time, and a search and quest for transcendence. So the whole idea would be that, you know, we go out into nature and we transcend into the sublime, right? What is the sublime? Let's talk about it. So the sublime is basically a combination of passion, awe, and fear. Passion, not just emotion, but it is like a state of suspended reason and emotion, okay? Think of if you've ever been in a car crash or if you've ever been on Tower of Terror where it just drops really suddenly, right? Like that pit of your stomach where you're like, holy crap, what's happening right now? You're completely overpowered, okay? And it's your emotion plus your reasoning. Astonishment is the state of the soul where all emotions are in suspense and extreme amount of horror. So awe, like if you are awestruck, you are in astonishment, okay? So according to this time, awesome is like you are literally in awe. So like if Jesus Christ just walked through your door right now, that's awesome. Like your shoes aren't awesome, right? Like it would have to literally be something that like just overpowers you completely. Fear goes into terror, right? Vastness and the unknown. So these are all important elements for the sublime. Basically, a combination of awe and terror is the sublime. So this is best represented in a very common cover of Frankenstein. This is a painting that was also like came out in 1818, the year that Frankenstein came out, and this is called Wanderer Above a Sea of Fog. So you have a writer, an artist, they're all demonstrating the same thing. We've got here, maybe it's Victor, maybe it's not, who knows, but you have somebody standing in a very vast, isolated, scary place, and it is beautiful and wonderful, but also terrifying. Why is it terrifying? You kind of get the perspective that you are an infinitesimal human being in the world around you, like you are just a blip in the space that you're in, right? And also, I mean, what's so scary about this? I don't know, maybe you could fall off. That is scary too, right? So, like, the vastness, the beauty of all the nature and whatnot is overwhelming. And then hopefully we get to transcend mentally outside of our five senses into the sublime. That is the immediate goal. We want to transcend to the sublime. And that's how we make poetry, right? So this is what a lot of poets would do during this time. They would go out into nature and they would try to be inspired to get to the sublime so that they could write magical poetry, okay? There's a literal whole poem on daffodils, like literally, like the flower. So nature was huge at this time. Now, sometimes if we go into nature, we're romantic right now, okay? If we go into nature and we don't experience the sublime, we're just stuck. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now, but it's not what I want. Well, opium can help. Okay, opium will definitely help. So some of the romantics did opium. Now, this is not a fact. However, if you ever find research on it, please let me know. This idea that she experiences a literary vision, the doctor that was with them, who wrote the vampire story, very likely carried opium on him. Doctors at this time did carry opium to help with sleep. Mary Shelley couldn't sleep. She has a literary vision. Now, was it opium inspired? I have no idea, but I feel like it was. But hey, that's just my personal opinion. But it's technically, they said, a literary vision. So it's very probable, but it's not known. That there's no scholarship written on it that I've seen so far. All right. So this story is written as a frame narrative. Now, the structure of it is very important just to kind of understand what's happening in the story. So a frame narrative, literally think of a picture frame and then what's in it and then what's in it. So it's a story of a story within another story. It is a memory of a memory of a memory being told, okay? So we start the book with Robert Walton. You're going to read 4 letters from this random dude on a boat. His name is Robert, and he's writing to his sister. Robert comes across 2 figures at the very beginning. These are from the opening letters. This is actually letter 4. We perceived a low carriage fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs pass towards the north, the distance of half a mile. A being which had the shape of man but apparently of gigantic stature sat in the sledge, guided by dogs. Okay, so this, I'll tell you right now, the first figure they see, that's the creature. That's the monster, okay? Then, only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within, whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not as the other travelers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered land, but an European. Okay, so there are slight things. A savage inhabitant of some undiscovered land, right? You could definitely do like a a reading on the racism too. And you can either be like Mary Shelley was racist or she was just reflecting the racism at the time. So the second person that they see is this traveler who's European, and that is Victor Frankenstein. They rescue him. Okay. So we start off. Robert Walton saves Victor Frankenstein. So Robert Walton is telling his sister, also us, the story of Frankenstein. And then we get into Victor Frankenstein telling his side of the story. Then he tells the creature's side of the story. And then back to Victor and back to Robert Walton. So we've got 3 layers: Walton, Victor, creature. And then it kind of goes in reverse. So I've laid out the chapters here for you so that it makes more sense. All of them are in first person, okay? Like literally everybody, this is Robert Walton, Victor Frankenstein, creature. They all start with I. So I am by birth a Genovese, that's Victor. It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. That's the creature. So how do we know who's talking when? That's really important just to kind of understanding, just because otherwise it's really confusing. So I strongly recommend keeping this in mind. We've got the opening letters, and the final letter is Robert Walton, which is kind of like, hey, this is one giant letter to his sister, the story of Frankenstein. Okay, so then he is telling us Victor's tale. Victor speaks in chapters 1 through 9 and chapters 17 through 24. The creature speaks chapters 11 through 16, okay? So this is the way it is structured. If you have any questions about this, please reach out, ask. I could try to re-explain it in a different way. But just so you know who the I is, who's talking, just take a look at the chart of who is speaking in which chapter, and that should clarify some things. Okay, so lastly, I want to show you Mary Shelley's grave. Now, like it was said that her only real mother was a tombstone, and that's because she never knew her mother because she died 11 days after her birth. So Mary Shelley would come here and voraciously read her mom's work, and that's how she would get to know her mother, essentially. She spent a lot of time at this graveyard, and churchyard, graveyard, both. So I do want to point out that her whole family's here. We've got Mary Shelley, her father and mother, and then Percy Bysshe Shelley, his heart only, okay? And then we've got Percy Florence Shelley, and which is their son, and then Jane Shelley, who is the son's wife. So everybody is in this little tomb right here. Now, I went here when I went to Europe, and I bought a cheap copy of Frankenstein, and I sat right here and I read my favorite parts of the book. And I know, total nerd alert, but it was, honestly, it was a really great experience. So here we've got like this little church, and there's like walking areas like all the way around, basically the whole perimeter. So Mary Shelley and Percy began taking walks together in the St. Pancras churchyard, and that is this. And they had sex for the first time shortly after. Tradition affirms this took place in the churchyard. Yes, she had sex in a churchyard. Some people are being like, oh my God, she totally like had sex on her mom's grave. Did not happen. That's rumor. But there are places, I walked at the churchyard. There are places where one could do that. Just saying. And then they declared their love for each other June 1814, right? Mary was 16, Percy was 21. Okay. So, another part about her grave, which I find really interesting, is notice what they give us here. Are there any depictions, author of Frankenstein? Nope. We just have Mary Shelley, daughter of these two people, widow of this guy. There's no mention of Frankenstein here. In the church, I walked around. It literally was like Mary Shelley didn't even exist. And you'd figure that there would be something, author of Frankenstein, on the tomb. Nope. there's two things going on here. One, again, the misogyny was real, but two, the very existence of this book, kind of like questioning creation, is essentially questioning God. So the church didn't like this, and they thought it was disgusting and horrible. So I have a feeling that's why they didn't really acknowledge her writing in that way, because the whole basis, she's really struggling with this concept of, is God real? And her father and her husband were both like very well-known atheists. So her life, she was like kind of like grappling with this concept of God. Does he exist, etc.? And we definitely see that in the novel. You'll kind of get glimpses of it, because again, if you truly believe in God, you're not going to be questioning how you came to be, right? And the whole thing is we're not supposed to question, right? According to that lore. So this is Mary Shelley. Actually, more appropriately, this is Mary Shelley. This is Percy Shelley, okay? And yeah, so I gave you guys the background on Mary Shelley because a lot of things kind of correlate with the novel. I've had students write essays on her life and how that shines through the novel. So you could totally do that. You could do like you can write from the perspective of like analyzing the biblical allusions critically, right? There's so much here, but you're going to have to take some sort of perspective, whether it be existential, psychological, queer theory. We will cover that, etc. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions or if you want me to make a video on anything else. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time.